fun way to come out of the 4th of July holiday. I hope everybody had a great weekend. I know the weather held up for us, so that was good. But thank you all for really being here today. I have the honor of serving as the 15th Secretary for the Maryland Department of Transportation. They're going to get mad at me because I'm going to get off my remarks here. But I remember going into my confirmation hearings and told them that I had worked for 7 of the 15 over the course of my career. And I had to really think about that. I looked it up and I'm counting. John was twice.
Didn't get it right the first time.
David was first, but at that point I don't think I knew we had a secretary, much less who the secretary was. But it was just such an honor to be here with this group and really this event here today. The fact that we're 50, we did the B&O Railroad anniversary the other day, and the governor was giving me a hard time because I turned 50 last year, and it was a bit of a nostalgic year. But thank you all for being here today. I think it's really, if you look at this group, it's not a group that I ever will take for granted, and I know I've worked with all of you and really gotten advice from all of you throughout the course of my career, but even most recently as I'm dealing with some of these challenges that we're dealing with. So, thank you all for being here. I look at Daryl, he and I feel like we grew up together at State Highway. But, joining us here today, we have Secretary Hellman was going to be here today, but he wasn't feeling well this morning, so he had to kind of bail out, but we wish him the best. He and I have been working on the Canton Railroad together over the last few weeks. It's been keeping us busy. Jim Lighthizer was our secretary from 91 to 94. David Winstead was our secretary from 95 to 98. John Picari was our secretary from 99 to 2003, and then 2007 to 2009, before he went off to USDOT. Secretary Flanagan was here with 2003 to 2007. Beverly, Secretary Swim Staley was here between 2009 and 2012. And then Daryl was here 2012, 2013. And then Secretary Smith was here from 13 to 15. So what a great group. I don't know what it says, that nobody stays super long, but they're here. But good. But thank you all. I'm just really honored and humbled to be here as part of this group. In addition to our transportation secretaries, we have a number of the members of our Maryland Transportation Commission here today, which was formed at the same time as MDOT, along with the Transportation Authority, who's represented by Executive Director Jim Ports today. Representing our agencies today, we have Maryland Aviation Administrator Ricky Smith. We have MVA Administrator Chrissy Nizer, who I never realized how many calls you get until you become secretary and you get the calls. Our acting Maryland Transit Administrator, Holly Arnold. I think I saw Holly. There she is. From SHA, we have our Administrator, Tim Smith, and I believe I saw Betty and Andre back there as well. And then from the port, we have our Chief Financial Officer, Wanza Span, representing Executive Director Bill Doyle. Wanza, thanks for being here today. Bill is out on a dredge right now, I believe. I just want to welcome several members of our longtime MDOT team who are joining us today from across MDOT, including someone that I also feel like I grew up with, Barbara Malloy, who is back there from SHA. These are all employees that have been with our department for 50 years or more. Oh. Leonidas Sessions, who's with us today. We have Joseph Truitt and Wilson Wallace Jr., all from MTA, operators and big part of our transit team. So thank you all for being here today. Each of you have been members of this team for more than 50 years. I remember last couple of years I saw the retirement of some longtime employees, and I remember sitting down, we were down on the Eastern Shore, we were cutting the ribbon on new bridge decks on the Salisbury Bypass. And those of you who have been around remember Donnie Drewer, who was our district engineer down on the shore. And Donnie puts his arm around me and says, "I think we're going to have to retire soon, Greg." And I said, "Why, Donnie? Don't leave." And he says, "Because I was the original construction manager on those first bridges, and it's time for me to go." But I still see Donnie. He still lives down in the shore area. He's got some of those trotter horses over at Ocean Downs. So if you're ever over at Ocean Downs, you'll see Donnie kind of hanging around. He knows everybody in the room, always has. But the employees that have been with us for that long are just very special to us in this department. They have so much history, so much dedication, and we're just really grateful to have you here and really grateful to have you as part of our team. So thank you for being with us today, but also for all of your service over the years. So congratulations to each of you for 5 decades of service. I am honored to work alongside each and every one of you and each and every one of the 10,000 public servants we have at MDOT. And I want to welcome back all of the MDOT employees who are returning to the office, some just today after 16 months in a remote environment. We were laughing the other day, 10 days to flatten the curve. We'll be back in 10 days. We'll be back in 10 days. Don't need to take your stuff with you. We'll be back in 10 days. But I think the team did a tremendous job, and I can't thank them enough. We went into a remote environment very quickly. It was a very challenging year. We lost a fair number of our employees to COVID. We had 2 of our transit operators killed on the job, really just trying to keep our communities moving. And it was just a challenging year for a lot of us. So I couldn't be happier to see all of your faces back into this building today, because it just gets us back to some sort of normalcy. And I know each of you are here right now, and those of you who are watching as part of our team are grateful, and I just thank you for your dedication to us and your dedication to the citizens of Maryland, and for sticking with us through this last 16 months as we were in a challenging place. But as I reflect a little bit in preparation for today, I couldn't help but think about how much transportation has changed over the last 50 years. And I don't know whether that 1970 car is still out front.
Yes,
it is.
This morning. But how much has changed. The new technology has completely changed the way we do business. I love this photo behind me of our first transportation secretary collecting a toll on the Bay Bridge for the first time. In the middle of COVID, we went to all electronic tolling. Those toll booths are back behind the bridge in the maintenance area, and it was just such a challenge. But we get more comments about the first couple of months it was, I don't know what's different about the Bay Bridge. I can't quite figure it out. And then I would get those, when are you going to start taking tolls again? Oh, we're collecting your toll. We're just doing it on the other side of the bridge. So check your Easy Pass. But but the mission of MDOT to move people and goods as efficiently as possible has remained the same. It will always remain the same. That's our job. And as you may know, I started at MDOT at the State Highway Administration 25 years ago and worked my way up. And I feel like personally I'm more proud of that than I am of becoming secretary. But I'm just more proud of the way we work through. One of the things I probably should have done over the years is change my cell phone number, because every person I worked with over the last 25 years still has my cell phone number. But they call, and I think that's the pulse of MDOT. And I remember in the planning director seat, John was our secretary when I first became planning director. Our administrator was Neil Peterson. We had just hit the Great Recession. And Neil says to me, he says, I need you to go meet with all the counties and tell them everything we're cutting.
Beautiful, Simon.
Beautiful. So I went down to Prince George's County. I think Darrell was with me. But then the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act hit, and it was we were able to rebuild and work through that. And we were seeing very similar things as part of that. And I sit here with this group, and I feel like I've learned something from every single one of you over the years. Shortly after that, I remember John, we were doing the CTP tours in Montgomery County. Remember the office down at Greenbelt? We used to do those down at Greenbelt.
District 3. Yep.
District 3 office. And there was a group out front protesting the Route 1, where they were advocating for the Route 1 construction, College Park. And I was kind of the new planning director. I thought I was going to help John out, and I opened the side door for him. He could sneak in past the crowd out front. And I don't know if John ever even remembers this, but he came up to me and he said, "Thanks, Greg." And he says, "Now let's go up and talk to them." But that was such an important lesson in public service, and I still carry that with me today. He also told me to never pass up a bathroom.
More true than ever.
But those are the kind of lessons that I really think about, and I still, to this day, I think about that every time I go into somewhere where, it's a tough crowd or a tough group, and just kind of don't be afraid to go in there and kind of work with them. But, I've worked on, over the years, my first NEPA approval at State Highway was I-81. We have 2 phases of that under construction today. I've tried to get the NEPA approval on the American Legion Bridge 3 times now. And we're trying to get that through. But we're hoping to kind of do some things on 270. We just implemented ramp metering on 270. 15 years ago, they told us it would never get done. But the adaptive technology, I think, is really going to help us getting that out there. I worked on the Severn River Bridge project. It's probably one of the smaller ones that I worked on that I feel like I was really proud of, because we got such pushback from the community. We're taken down to, we were going to add another lane, and we're going to do it within the existing bridge. And we were going to have to take the lanes down to 10 feet during construction. You'll never get it done. You'll never get it done. We pushed through, and finally got it done. And I remember we were getting ready to advertise it for construction. And God bless Jock Friedman, who was our bridge director for many years, came to me and he says, "Greg, I don't know if we did the weight analysis on that." Liaison through planning, and that was just never really thought about it. But Jock came back to us 2 weeks later and said, "I have good news and bad news. The bad news is we didn't really do a thorough weight analysis at one, but the good news is we figured out a way to make those 2 bridges one bridge to manage the weight." And so for the first 6 months of construction, we worked underneath the bridge and fused the bridge together.
Wow.
Made it one bridge, and then put the extra lane of traffic. And we knew we had a hit of a project when we were like number 2 trending on Twitter, because we had just broken that bottleneck of people that were working in Annapolis but just needed to get on the other side of that bridge. And so, but those are the little projects. We just opened up the Southwest Outer Loop on the Baltimore Beltway, another big project. 2 of the bigger challenging ones that we have getting ready to start. One is replacement of the triple bridges on I-70 and 695, trying to manage that construction and get that out the door. But also, we're going to implement some technology, overhead lane controls on the Baltimore Beltway within the existing footprint, and use the shoulders during the peak. And we found that we could spend $100 million or so and save 15 minutes off every directional commute on the Beltway just by breaking that down with overhead lane controls. So we're doing things a lot differently than we did 15 years ago when I was in the planning director seat, but much less 25 years ago when I started. It was all different then. I remember working on the maps on the ICC, and I know a lot of people at this table worked on the ICC. And then, the first maps were the northern alignment and the southern alignment. And it was battled with the Waldorf bypass. Remember the Waldorf bypass? We were working on that one for many years. But it's been great. And so, our guests today have seen even more history, and made some of the critical decisions that impact us today. And I'm really grateful to have everybody here today, whether it's public-private partnerships or the ICC or BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport or the growth that we've seen at the Port of Baltimore. We've had a tremendous 50 years, and everybody at this table has been a big part of it, and everybody in this room has been a big part of it. So a lot of work today. Afterwards, we're going to head outside for a few minutes, and I didn't realize there was a time capsule that was there before. And she's not here, but what they won't tell you is Judy Slater was the only one that remembered where it was. Yeah. They moved it when they built the building, and
I don't remember that.
nobody knew where it
Did
was.
you?
But
No.
Judy remembered where it was.
She must have personally supported it.
So she was right, and we got it out, and a lot of it I think is back on that table there today that was in there. But I want to take a few minutes and really kind of go around the room a little bit. I know Bill's not here, Bill Hellman, but when Bill was secretary when I was in high school, and I've had the real pleasure of working with him on the Canton Railroad over the last year, and he continues to serve this state in a great way. But really thanks to the efforts of Bill back when I was in high school and he was serving this state, that was when the gas tax was created. And Bill had to do a lot of that legwork and that dedicated funding sources for the trust fund, and set the stage for a lot of what we built over the last 30, 40, 50 years. He oversaw the completion of that national freeway through Western Maryland, expansion of BWI International Airport, Kenton Narrows Bridge on Route 50, the old drawbridge. I can remember being a kid sitting on the hood of a car waiting for the drawbridge to go down because we were headed to Ocean City. And then, of course, the dredging at the Port of Baltimore that really started a lot under Bill. And, if he was here, I'd ask him what his most important thought was. But one of the most interesting things I read about Bill was during that gas tax was how he stood outside of the room in the legislature and personally shook every person's hand and asked them for a vote on that bill. And I just couldn't remember anybody ever doing that, just standing there and asking for that. But Secretary Lighthizer, you were here when we spurred a lot of the growth at BWI Airport. And you personally worked with Herb Keller on the Southwest Airlines to BWI deal. I know that, and dedicated funding for that international terminal. And really what we've seen today, the growth has a lot to do with that. I knew we were in a very different time in this pandemic when I found myself and just kind of thinking nostalgically that I was sitting in one of those rocking chairs at BWI Marshall Airport, eating a crab cake out of a styrofoam container with Gary Kelly. And I think there were 10 people in the airport, and just talking about what we needed to do to make people feel safe when they fly. But if I look, I think you're in one of these pictures back here with Governor Schaefer on the groundbreaking of the light rail, the Central Light Rail. I think we have some of our long-serving operators, our light rail operators back here with us today. But today we're building another light rail system in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. on the Purple Line. And that's going to be connecting Montgomery and Prince George's County, very much like this light rail connected some communities in Baltimore. But it's also going to feature all electric rail cars.
Wow.
And so, you start to see the evolution but beyond your focus on infrastructure and economic development, I have to ask you, how did you balance kind of the community challenges around BWI Marshall with the growth of the airport? I'm sure you were facing some of that.
Yeah, it was a big challenge. The airport was an underappreciated state asset.
Mm-hmm.
And after, I don't know anything about transportation, but once I started figuring it out, the port got all the publicity, usually because the unions were urinating on management and back and forth. But they got all the attention. And
I got in trouble at the court. That happened.
But as I watched it, of course, my office right across the street from it and I watched the numbers drop the first year from 10 million to 8.5. And it occurred to me that it was a hell of an asset, but that the neighbors, Mike Wagner was the senator, I see his picture up there, who was a great guy from that area. We had to put up with all this crap. The neighbors complaining, the delegates, Pat Scanello and Schmenke and Bunkathy. They were buddies. I knew them. I'd served with them in the legislature. So we tried to figure out what the hell can we do to make this damn thing an amenity. Well, one was we spent $5 million, I think, and put in that observation tower. Bought a plane, tore it up, The other thing was we eventually long-term took all the money from his administration to build the hiker-biker trail with ICE-T money. The soccer fields, general aviation, beautification. I'll never forget, I told Ted Matheson, who was administrator, God bless him, and I said, I want this place, it looks like hell coming in here. It looks like Dresden driving to and from the airport. Pretty it up. And so he came up with a plan. He said, Jim, it's going to cost $300,000. And I said, Ted, you make $20 million a year. I don't give a damn how much goddamn money you spend. Put trees in, flowers, and the old house there, that gave them money. In other words, you make the place a community center for a variety of reasons, so that while they put up with those GD planes landed, they know it's an asset too, that something they can go to and enjoy, take their kids to, and that kind of thing. And that's what it became. And I don't monitor it close anymore, but I don't hear the screaming that you used to hear 25 years ago, when the neighbors really were justifiably, U.S. Airway was a hub. It was a defensive hub, but that's another story. But all these damn planes are landing, at 5 o'clock or 5:15, scores drove people nuts. So that's what we did. It was a concerted effort to have ball fields and bike trails and observation towers and old houses, people come visit, and community events and that kind of thing, so that it was a center of a thing. And it worked, as far as I can tell.
Well, I think that's a lot of what we're still trying to continue today, because we still do have concerns. We still hear concerns from the community. When we're expanding even on the freight side, you still hear concerns. You
always will. It's just the nature of the beast, okay? But you can mitigate it, and that's what you've got to do. So, it's tolerable to them. It's something they'll put up with.
We saw very close to pre-pandemic numbers this weekend at BWI Marshall.
Right.
That's wonderful. Good to hear. Tell you one quick story. That there was a local rec guy who wanted to put 2, I think, soccer fields near general aviation. And because we had the fields, and so he comes to see me, and I said, sure, what the hell can we? They called Ted in, Matheson. He says, Jim, we can't do it. I said, why not? He said, liability. Some kid may break his leg. I said, we are a $2 billion organization. I don't care if 10 kids break their damn legs. If the community likes it, do it. Who cares about liability? You're $2 billion. And they built the park, and the kids are running around. I don't know if they're breaking their legs or not, but nobody's complaining.
Well, Secretary Winstead, you took over when Secretary Lighthizer left off, so you got to cut the ribbon on that international terminal and that new light rail spur to the airport. You were the secretary when I first started at MDOT, and we didn't really get a chance to work together until I was in the planning director seat and you were working on the White Flint 355 work, and that's where you and I got to know each other. But I think one of the things that you did was cut the ribbon on the operations center, the Hal Kassoff Operations Center over in not far from here in Hanover, and we don't really realize that, but we just redid that. And so we just brought it up to speed to a new kind of new standards, and it's been such an evolution in that operations center. And what we did was we created. Since then, we've cut agreements with Maryland State Police and our law enforcement partners, and we have data partnerships with like Waze and Google Traffic, and they're bringing in real-time data, and so we're seeing these things all come to fruition. But the way we redid it was, of course, new monitors and new technology, but we also brought in more collaborative spaces so that our chart dispatchers and our law enforcement officers can like sit next to each other and deal with incident management. But that facility has been an example for many across the country as the right way to do it. And what did when you look at that and where we've come, you've stayed pretty active in transportation issues. What do you feel like you learned from that time of kind of putting those things into operation to where we are today? And what you're seeing?
I think the ops center is, I haven't seen the
I haven't
renovation
either.
of it. Ricky Smith and I were talking the other day about a facility at the airport, and our head of engineering at the airport has now built the same facility twice. We just approved it. But, the chart center is so critical. I mean, we're still a wonderful state with great geography and great politics and two urban areas that are vibrant, but we have a huge congestion issue, and figuring out how to raise the technology, bring that into a control center, make sure our partners on the county level, county DOTs are glued into this. I remember years ago, I had the pleasure in my final year being president of AASHTO, and I remember seeing a lot of national data, and back then 20% of congestion was caused by traffic accidents and the ensuing rescue, the emergency vehicles coming to the scene. I mean, so I know the chart is the coordination between the state police with the fire, the EMS people is critical. So I think it continues to be a huge area of innovation because of what we're seeing. You go on your iPhone and Waze and all the links you have to getting information about traffic and options on commuting and that kind of thing. So, I'm glad to hear it continually gets renovated. The only other, like Jim, my only other recollection that was a tough assignment, it's a little off the chart, but I think Dale and others were coaching me and saying, you've got to go to the Board of Public Works. And I said, well, you always told me you never want to say there at the Board of Public Works. And Hal Kassoff, and so we got, it was, I guess it was Tom Osborne at that point, we got to paint the Bay Bridge. Okay, well, what's the deal? He said, well, we had 2 bids. And I said, okay. He said, one in-state and one out-of-state. The out-of-state bidder had done all of the renovation of all the bridges in and out of Manhattan, and our local competition had done 1. I said, well, so the out-of-stater won, and I had to go down to the Board of Public Works and defend this. The contract was for $70 million to paint the Bay Bridge, and Louis Goldstein was still on the Board of Public Works. And he looked at me and he said, Mr. Winstead, do you know how much it cost to build that bridge? He said, that bridge was completed when I was still in this job. And I said, $70 million. And I said, well, now it costs that much to paint it. So, anyway, we did get it approved, but
We're still painting it.
we're still painting it.
But something interesting, there's a convergence there of the Bay Bridge and the Operations Center. One of the things that we've seen coming out of COVID is how the travel patterns have changed. Our volumes are almost back to where they were, but the peaks are very different. And we just had to make the decision last week to take all of our Eastern Shore Friday tools and deploy them on Thursday. Because people, whether it's people working remotely or people we need to start those commute tools at 12 or 11 o'clock in the morning versus you should be able to get that 3 o'clock rush at Severn River and the Bay Bridge, and now it's kind of trickling into the different days, and it's tougher to see. But the challenge we deal with now is the convergence of Waze and Google Traffic have really created a situation where when it gets congested, the whole local system locks down because they're routing all around the neighborhoods, and it becomes a real challenge for us. Secretary Pacari, you and I have talked a lot over the last year, I think, but you negotiated the procurement on the new Woodrow Wilson Bridge. And I know you had to make some tough phone calls on that one too. But in your first service, and then cut the ribbon. You negotiated the deal in your first term, and then cut the ribbon on it in your second term. I think you've had quite a career going from secretary here to deputy secretary. I do have a question I want to ask you, but I want to know if you remember this. We were doing, when I learned where you were going to be the deputy secretary, was it you and I were on the phone, Neil Peterson, were on the phone with the secretary of VDOT. And I can't remember who it was at the time.
Pierce?
Pierce Homer.
Was it Pierce Homer?
I think so, yeah.
And we had a West Side mobility study, and we were going to take the lanes on the American Legion Bridge down to 10 feet, and we thought we could get another lane of traffic in there. And that was kind of your face to Neil and I at that point too. Like, are you sure you want to do this? You sure want to do this? Let's get on the phone with VDOT and see what their thoughts are on it. But before the call started, I don't think whoever the secretary was realized that others were on the call, and they said, "Hey, if the rumors about you going to USDOT are true," and Neil and I were like, "What? Where's John going?" But you really were the only person to serve as secretary twice. Do you feel like you had experiences in your first stint that you were able to kind of carry into your second one and be able to do things a little bit differently?
I think so. More than anything else, it shows that I'm a slow learner, so I had to keep at it. But the experience of the first tour certainly helps. And you mentioned the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and that's where I started describing major projects as a series of near-death experiences, because they clearly are. And for those of you who were involved in the project, it was when we actually put it out to bid, it came back on that fateful day with one bid. And it was 60% over the engineer's estimate. So on a $2.4 billion project. And because it was the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and it was the Maryland, Virginia, and the district all had territory there, I had the distinct honor of talking to two governors and a mayor and giving them the bad news. But the other takeaway from that is that regional cooperation really is everything. And the short version of this is with a lot of very smart people around the table, we decided to break it up into 3 smaller bids, rebid it, and that, you never saw it in the Washington Post, but that project was ultimately delivered $60 million under the original estimate. So it showed that there's really a lot that can be done with a strong team. The other takeaway from that project is actually community-based. So that was started under Governor Glendenning, and you recall that was the beginnings of smart growth and that work. And the restoration of the Maryland portion of the Anacostia River was a big priority. And there was no way that DNR or any other state agency could really fund that. And as you recall, the EIS was built around, the purpose need was built around actually more than just mitigation, but restoring part of the Anacostia. And if I remember correctly, about $100 million worth of restoration, including removing an old private illegal landfill that was in the river, connecting a trail network that was just starting at the time, 77 acres of wetlands. My larger point is that it took a while for me to understand it, but if you have community and environmental goals you're trying to achieve, find a transportation project, marry the two together, and you can pay for it. So that's true here in Maryland, it's true nationally, and I think that, and you've certainly done your share of that, so I think the smart DOTs have figured out that you can do achieve multiple objectives with those projects.
I worked on the Harriet Tubman Scenic Byway Visitor Center, very similar story. How do you kind of bring that together? They would have never been able to open that visitor
Yeah.
center without that transportation.
Or the statewide trail networks, or some of the Civil War battlefield work, those kinds of things. You marry them to a transportation project.
You buy goodwill, and
Yeah,
it's also quality of life,
absolutely.
and it works every time.
And at the end of the day, transportation is not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. So
Yep.
if you're building a stronger economy for the future, if you're strengthening communities, if you're trying to build a more equitable future, and if you're responding to the existential challenge of climate change, transportation is how you do it.
Remember, when I was in the planning director's seat, I had responsibility for the transportation enhancement program, which was then turned into the alternatives program. And Marcy Ross from Commerce and I used to call it transportourism. You know, just bring it together. We'll make up a word and bring it together. Secretary Flanagan, you oversaw the rebirth of the ICCC, and that's been a critical route for us as part of. I imagine that had some near-death experiences. I had my first secretary near-death experience with the Purple Line, that series of near-death experiences. But I feel like the ICC has served as a really great example of how we can successfully deploy a facility with all electronic tolling. And that was really the first one we did. But, knowing that you were there kind of in the rebirth, how satisfying was that to kind of see that come to completion?
Yeah, the advantage that I had was that Governor Ehrlich made it very clear that this was his priority. And the way he did it, I remember at the BWI partnership breakfast, he brought me up and he introduced me. This is Bob. If you don't build the ICC, you don't have a job, Flanagan. And so, fortunately, we have a lot of good people at MDOT and at SHA and all around, and so they got behind the issue. So they understood. Yeah. I think what is gratifying and is, number one, you are in an era now where with the internet and technology, all of a sudden transportation, the technology of transportation is exploding. And I think the idea of the public-private partnership, was that with you, John, or
Yeah.
Beverly? You were when you got that through the legislature. MDOT, a government agency, has to partnership in order to keep up with technology, and so that legislation was passed at the right time for you to be dealing with this. And I will just add one thing about the ICC, and Greg, you probably know this, but as we were leaving office, we were doing a study with Virginia about if we extended the ICC or extended the express toll lanes into Virginia, what would be the benefit? And one of the deputies got back to me and he said, look, what we found is we were just so surprised at how extending the system would improve mobility. It wasn't just a factor of 2 or 3, it just was an explosion. And that's what you're dealing with now. I realize that. Mm-hmm. And you have some people who want to figure out a better way to help you, right? Sure. But that is so important in terms of mobility and in terms of the region. When I went back to the legislature, one of the things that I would talk about and was able to get tremendous consensus is that I guess they now call it DMV. That confused me for a while, but you know, the Washington-Baltimore metropolitan area is going to become a megapolis, and it is going to do well if it becomes a unit where people can get together and work together, and people can work in one area and commute in another area. And again, that project that you are working so hard and you're gonna get it, I know you are, is incredibly important part of bringing the region together, so.
I worked a lot on the front end of the ICC, and you know, my good friend Melinda Peters, who did an amazing job on that project, is still a very close friend. I will never forget. Melinda and I were runners, and so we would go out and run marathons and half marathons together and kind of talk, and nobody
Conversational speed, right?
conversationally, right? So nobody would ever beat Melinda. She was very competitive, and I'll never forget. I still give her a hard time about this. We were running the Ocean City half marathon. It was Ocean City to Assateague, and I lost her in the crowd, and I was really feeling good about myself that day. And, you know, I was in a pretty good pace. You know, I think I ran like an hour and 40 minutes for 13 miles. I think, you know, I thought it was pretty good. And I lost her in the crowd, and I thought, I'm sure I beat her. There's no way. And I went through the finish line and then into the tent where they would kind of carry off. She already changed her clothes. And I was like, I knew there was, I was not going to beat that at any point in time, but she did an amazing job. And then, you know, another very close friend of mine who was my first mentor in this business was my late friend Raja Varamashamini. Worked on that project on the front end, and just both of them just did amazing work.
If I can just add, Raja and Neil, that whole team,
They did.
because, you know, our goal was to get that approved
Yeah.
within our first term. And I don't think it's just really miraculous that it was done.
Well, you know, it's
John kept it alive, by the way. I'm not going to go on that.
But you know, John referenced major projects being near-death experiences. You know, my theory has always been in every major project like that, there will be at least 5 to 10 times where your team will show up in your door and tell you it can't be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our job as leaders is to not look at them and say, "Oh, okay, I guess we're going to stop." Our job as leaders is to sit down and say, "Okay, what are we dealing with? What are the challenges that we're dealing with? Let's figure out how to build more community support, or let's figure out how to overcome that technical issue or something like that." Because you can just as easily give up on any of those at any time. Secretary Swim Staley, you know, you oversaw the opening of the ICC. You and I got to know each other. We were doing the NEPA approval on the Thomas Johnson Bridge.
Oh, yeah, we had the privilege of doing a lot of CTP tours
Yes.
as deputy secretary, so, yeah.
So we spent a lot of long trips down to
A lot of
Pax
trips
River.
to Southern Maryland.
But, you know, under your leadership, Maryland became a model for public-private partnerships. Coming out of that law that still stands today, which is still a great law coming out of the bipartisan commission. You know, you oversaw the development of the Chesapeake House and the Maryland House, which still continues to be a great partnership for us today. Thousands of people visit them every day. You oversaw the Port Administration and the Ports America P3 to make those capital investments in the Port of Baltimore, including that 50-foot berth and the 400-foot cranes that are behind me. I think there they are on that picture. The next set, they tell me they have to hook in and pull to a 45-degree angle to get them under the bridge.
Make sure you watch it go under the bridge, because that was one of the great experiences that I had.
So that's the advice that I got, and that was kind of the question. So I would like to stand on the bridge
Yes.
when it's coming underneath.
Yes, we closed the bridge, and we stood on the bridge, and it went underneath. So go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see the blood drain.
I
from
got it.
Jim's
I already.
face.
Right, what's the
No,
standard?
and we all held our breath, the few of us that were on that bridge.
Looking at the tide charts and everything else. But, you know, really my question for you, Beverly, is, you know, My suspicion is the answers are still the same today, but why, what made you think about the P3 models and how we could get out of them and how they could play a critical role in delivering infrastructure?
Well, I'd had a long history here at MDOT, and I was sitting here thinking, I've worked with or for 5 of the gentlemen at this table prior to being secretary. Bob at the legislature, which is actually where a lot of the P3 stuff started, because I started there as a budget analyst. So it was sort of organic for me. Greg, it wasn't like me. It was about Virginia was so far ahead of us there for a while, seemingly, and so the legislature was trying to figure it out, and then Jim brought me in as the CFO, and we were still trying to figure it out, and through David and John. So really it was, like everything, even if it seems like an overnight or seems like one person did it, it's usually a long, tedious journey with a lot of people. So I think in every job that I had, in every 3 governors, we were always trying to figure out how to make public-private partnerships work here in the state of Maryland with the special challenges that we have. But I think ultimately we've always been able to do it, so I'm sure you'll figure it out as well. And between the legislature, the Board of Public Works, and other issues, but there's, as you just said, there's usually a way to do it.
Yeah.
It's just patience and community building and stakeholder building and, making sure that everybody gets a say, whether they really are entitled to one or not. But make sure that you listen to them and they feel heard. And but it really, everybody, that preceded me had a piece, I think, in getting the legislation and then sort of figuring out how you make those work here in Maryland.
You oversaw the start of the gas tax increase.
I did the 93 gas tax increase from the legislature, and I guess Jim either rewarded me or punished me by then asking me to come work as the CFO. But that's how we got to know each other. So so gearing up for it felt like John, David, we all geared up how many times it was a perpetual gearing up for a tax increase. And then we thought we were really, really close, and turned out it was Jim that brought it home, but I had the dubious distinction of raising the tolls. And fortunately, since I already had police protection because I had a stalker while I was secretary, it was no big deal to continue to have the police protection to raise the tolls. So it was, always fun.
Now, Secretary Mobley, I feel like you and I grew up together. We started State Highway. I was working in the survey division. Darrell was a new engineer. We worked on did we work on the Waldorf bypass together? No. Hughesville. It was the Hughesville bypass. It was the era of bypasses. But we worked on a lot of projects together, and then, you ended up being the District 3 engineer while I was in the planning director seat. I think you had a momentary lapse and left MDOT for a little while and then came back. But, you really were right in the mix of the P3 law and the gas tax increase and everything kind of happening there. But, what in your mind was, I imagine your time was a little bit complex with all of those things kind of happening at the same time. But what I saw was you just continuing to be a good stabilizing force. And so what do you think your kind of highlights were when you were here?
I would say the revenue increase, the tax increase. And as Secretary Swain Staley mentioned, her and I worked very hard the previous year for that. And it was very difficult. We weren't successful that particular year.
That afternoon and died.
Yeah. And then, we kept at it when she left and I moved into the position. And was very fortunate to have Secretary Picari join me in Annapolis when we went and talked to a lot of elected officials. And like my predecessors, I had to knock on every single door. I met with every single one of them to get that revenue increase through. And I remember talking to, at the time, as a delegate, I'm not going to mention his name, he's now a senator. He said, Darrell, I'm not going to vote for that, right? And I said, I do know, but I owe you the respect to come to you and at least talk to you about what we have in this bill and why it's going to benefit the state of Maryland. And he said, I respect that. I appreciate that. But, we had to go and talk to all of the elected officials and our community partners in the transportation industry. But, the thing that was, I think, most important was the dedication of the employees here at MDOT that helped to craft the legislation, helped to continue to drive it home, and helped to bring that revenue increase in.
I think, what I saw too was, a lot of the conversations we're having now about the aid that we're getting from the federal government is how important it is that if they do the heavy lifting, that we're able to put those dollars to work right away.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do the heavy lift on legislation and then have it sit for 2 years while you're, in a kind of a behind the door engineering process. You just need to be able to get that right mix of construction projects out the door because you need to see it. You need to see the kind of fruits of your labor. Secretary Smith, you broke ground on the Kirk Avenue bus facility, and we just cut the ribbon on that 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. Great.
It is a beautiful, beautiful facility, and I can tell you that the employees that are working in that facility are now very envious of everyone else. So, but I do think it's just an amazing facility, and we can't forget about our facilities when we're making investments in transportation infrastructure, and that one is a great example of one, but also a great example of how we had to work with the surrounding communities and create partnerships and create relationships to be able to do that project. You also delivered that weekend mark service that we hear about a lot today. So, I know you and I got to know each other a lot during those CTP tours. I don't know if you remember this, but it was like your first week on the job, and we had to go to MML for the Cabinet Secretaries Roundtable, and I drew the honor of just kind of driving the new secretary to MML and briefing him up on everything from top to bottom of those of what we had there. We have that Secretaries Roundtable again this year virtually. One of the dubious honors that I have is I have the honor of doing that for 10 years straight, because I was doing it representing different secretaries or representing different administrators.
At least 1 year, yeah.
Yeah.
And then just coming back. But when you were here, you were really doing a lot of work to try and advance our transit systems and the operations. Can you talk a little bit about how that fit into what we were trying to do in the overall program and how important that was to that weekend mark service, but also everything else that we were doing in the region for transit?
Well, we were trying to make transit really available for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, I guess we were working at equity before it became the cause celeb, quite frankly, and so we were redoing the entire transit program in Baltimore, and we were also we were implementing all the hard work that you've already described from other secretaries with respect to the P3 program. We had the Purple Line, quite frankly, ready to announce the bid winner, and we had the Red Line ready to go out to bid. And that was a lot of really, you talk about negotiations, there was a lot of negotiations in connection with that. But our emphasis was on trying to use public transportation as a vehicle to address the needs of people in neighborhoods and communities, and because that's how you build a strong economic base. If all people or most people can get to where they need to go, you're going to have a strong economy, because they're going to have jobs, and they're going to be able to not only have jobs but also get to places of leisure and entertainment that they want to go, and of course that stimulates the economy also. So we had a lot of emphasis on both the bus system, the light rail system. Now things changed in subsequent administration, but the Purple Line it's been shaved down a bit, but it is still on target to come home, and that will be a major influence on movability of people, and also addressing to some extent the issue of climate change, which is front and center right now with what's going on in our country. I mean, we are lucky, but we're still going to have the sea rise. So, I mean, you know, looking ahead is really important for the leaders of this organization. And frankly, this organization, it has a reputation for being outstanding. Well, it is a deserved reputation. I mean, the expertise, the dedication, the caring that comes out of the Department of Transportation and all of its divisions. I mean, just the Port of Baltimore, we had to get into something as sexy as dredging in order to allow for ships that we knew were going to be coming through the Panama Canal once it had been expanded to have a port to come to, and we wanted them to come to the Port of Baltimore. So we spent a lot of time finding locations for sludge disposal so that we could prepare the port for that commerce that should come into Baltimore. So there was a lot of that kind of work being done and being done well by this department. And I was very, very proud to be working with the people that I worked with here.
They continue to be an amazing group, and you know, I know, having spent so much time here myself, and I think what you heard here today from everyone here is how the work that we all did, the successes that the department had under their leadership, really falls back to the foundation that was built by one person before, or two people before, or a generation before. And you know, that was something that really struck me. We have two projects that are happening right now within this department, and one is one we're calling a blueprint. And one of the things that I found personally when I came into this job was I just wanted to spend time with each of the modal heads. And you know, I spent my first day with Jim White down at the port. Just kind of, he had announced his retirement, and I just needed to kind of pick his brain a little bit. I'm going to sidebar for a second, but I'll never forget the day that this secretary's job was offered to me. I was in Salisbury, and I got a note from the governor's office wanting to know if I could be in Annapolis in 2 hours. At that point, it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I said, I think I can make it, but it's going to be tight. And I got there, and I got into the governor's office, and we were just talking, and he looks at me and he says, "You have no idea why you're here, do you?" and I said, "Absolutely not, but it's 4 o'clock, it's Friday, I'm looking for HR, I'm seeing what's going on, I think I'm doing okay." And he said to me, he said, "I think you've done a great job as SHA administrator. I want to talk to you about a different job." And my first place my head went was, please don't ask me to go to the port. Please don't ask me to go to or Jim White just retired. Oh, please don't ask me to go to the port. But the work that we did, and I spent, an afternoon with Jim just talking about, it was really a 50-year strategic plan for the Port of Baltimore that was in his head. And, I spent some time with Ricky down at the airport and talking about growth and the AB connector and the baggage handling system. That is, the enabling projects are on the Board of Public Works agenda tomorrow. I knew when I came out of State Highway very clearly that we needed to integrate ITS and technology into our system to get more out of it. And we needed to rethink some of our roadways to make them safer environments. We have roadways like Route 1 in College Park that were designed for these high-speed commuter routes, and now they're these dense urban environments that need to be very different. And spending time with Chrissy over at MVA and talking about just that vision for what the MVA is going to be in 10 years and 20 years, and just really looking over and kind of learning about the toll authority and the expansion of, and then the 95 plans, and then we just put the nice bridge out. And my thought when I came out of that was, we have got to get this down on paper as a blueprint for what our system is going to be. We had it all there. We had a clear vision in this department for what the system was going to look like in 20 years and 30 years and 50 years. What we didn't have was how it was all going to be integrated. And so we started this project called a blueprint, where we're just kind of developing it kind of ground up, and then we're integrating the system and looking at how rail can connect to highway and how people can connect from bus to rail, and so weaving it in with economic development and all of that. And then that really started to kind of get some momentum behind it. And then we thought about more strategic planning, because if our system is going to be that different in 50 years, how different does our organization have to be in 50 years? And so we started doing more strategic planning, thinking about what we need to do to make sure that we're the MDOT that can deliver for the next 50 years. And we're right in the middle of that. And don't be shocked if I reach out to each of you to say, give me your thoughts on this thing over the next year or so, because we really think it's an important foundation for what tomorrow's system is going to be. We're really excited about it. We think it's really going to serve as that guide for the next generation and what we do. And I think it'll be really important. Even things like taking the successes that we had in asset management at State Highway and building that out to our rail system and building that out to the port infrastructure, and thinking about the fact that I remember talking asset management with the port, and we had asphalt basically laid on top of wood piles from like 1900. And we had new businesses that were coming in, and if we didn't invest in it, they want to know where they're going to be is going to be in good shape. So just kind of taking those asset management focuses and figuring out what skill sets we're going to need tomorrow that we don't have today. And we're finding some pretty interesting stuff as we go down it.
Let me share a story.
Sure,
from Harry
absolutely.
Hughes. I think everybody knows Harry Hughes was the first Secretary of Transportation and went on to other, presumably greater things. But I had I'll give you his perspective on this being secretary. When I became secretary and I had my swearing in, I asked Harry Hughes if he would come and hold the Bible. And he very graciously did. So he walks up, and Governor O'Malley is there to swear me in. And Governor Hughes looks at him and says, she's got the best job in state government, being Secretary of Transportation. Being Secretary of Transportation is way better than being governor. So I did not need him to say that at that particular moment. But that was his perspective after his very long career, after being secretary, a very good governor, long retirement. He was still looking back upon his time as secretary as the best job that he'd had, and frankly, the best job that a person could have in the state of Maryland. So I just wanted to pass that because he started it all.
Very true.
I think several of you told me that when
I find that every day I could argue it's either the worst or the best job
Yes.
I've ever had.
Simultaneously.
Simultaneously.
Both at the same time.
But it's I think one thing I will never do is take for granted the impact that you can have on people in jobs like this. And even, I would say that for everybody in this room, just think about public service for me is just a privilege. It's always been a privilege to be able to come to work and know that everything I do can make an impact on someone's life. And it's my choice whether I want to make it negatively or positively. And I think we've come such a long way. I think about how hard we work in this department, and nobody realizes it. The long hours, we're here, we're here 12, 15 hours a day at times. and COVID has been pretty challenging. You know, just what can we do next? What can we do next? But with our focus on the people, and they really showed up for us when we needed them. Baltimore's bus system never went below 50% ridership.
Yeah.
When other systems in the country were down at 80%, and our operators showed up every single day.
Greg, I think a little bit of perspective is really important here. I've had the honor of actually at the federal level seeing every other state DOT up close and personal, and MDOT's near and dear to my heart, obviously, but I think objectively, when you look at it's the best in the country. When you look at the people here, the mission, ironically, Maryland DOT is built on the US DOT model, but does it better than US DOT. And that's a fact. And then you look at the state DOTs around the country, just the capacity to actually use transportation as a lever to improve quality of life and economic development and everything else is so much stronger here. And if you peel that back, it's the people. It is clearly the caliber of the people. And so this is a department that if there were national rankings, this would be number one and has been.
Yeah, the way it's organized too is just almost genius. I mean, it's. I mean, people. You're right. In the end, it's about people, but the way it's organized allows it to outperform. I mean, you would know far better than me because you have the national perspective. But just moving around, it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
I mean, when you had the transportation authority, you had all that secret money in your pocket.
Bring it on, Jeff. Bring it on. Yeah.
It was amazing, and the power the secretary had was just scary.
Yeah.
Nothing like it.
Yeah.
But if you look at like what we dealt with when the pandemic, when everybody stopped traveling, and our revenues just completely tanked, we didn't have to do what some of the other states had to do. We didn't have to lay people off. We didn't have to shut down construction.
Right.
We made ourselves whole in 20 and then figured out how to work it through 21 because we had the flexibility to just move those dollars around and keep that service going on our transit system without, I serve on the WMATA board, and WMATA had to make tremendous cuts to service that we didn't have to make because they didn't have that backstop.
Who said it? Was it Bridwell that set it up? Who's the guy that set this? I mean, it was done under Governor Mandel. He gets the credit. But was it?
Bill Ratchford on the legislative side was a key person.
Pardon me?
Bill Ratchford represented the legislative side.
But there was Bridwell, one of those.
Probably one of the commissioners.
Bridwell was one of the
He was
early
one of the early guys.
It's always the staff
Yeah.
But
that runs everything.
Yeah, you're always
But
taking
Bridwell,
credit for
because he had
staff
been
stuff.
at USDOT.
But he was a key actor and thing. But the guy was Mandel. I mean, Mandel. He reorganized all the state government.
It was 13 or 14 different agencies.
Yeah, it was part of an overall state government reorganization.
Which was that's the guy that gets the most credit, Governor Mandel. I mean, he was, in my mind, he was the best governor, certainly in my lifetime by far. And I worked for a great governor, but Mandel was amazing.
He modernized state government.
The whole state
The
government.
whole state.
And 50 years later, it's still
Still
humming.
works.
Greg, one interesting issue I think we face, the department faces, and I love your idea of this blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
It's all there, but bringing it together to understand, is this issue of post-COVID employment and workplace functions. I was talking to Ricky Smith last week about it, in terms of impact on business travel from BWI. I mean, I think it's going to have profound impact. Our law firm, been around for 100 years, is reducing its space by 30% nationwide. And people that I never worked from home before, have worked from home and found it's productive. So it's really, I think, part of what we're gonna is where's workplace gonna be? Where are people really gonna go, and what's their time period? It's gonna be an interesting couple years trying to watch that.
And from a MDOT business perspective, we found a couple of things. One is we can be really productive from home. We were about 2% remote workforce going into the pandemic. Coming out of it, we're going to be around 20%. We also found the research shows that you really need people to be in the office 3 days a week to be part of the culture of the department.
Right.
So the
No
use of
substitute.
collaboration, there's no substitution for that. but we don't have to be here on the same 3 days, and
Right.
you know, we can, and I find it could be a tremendous recruiting tool, and just bringing people together. But it really has been successful for us. You know, our IT systems have really been stable. They've worked for us. We had some. I know one of the things I'm dealing with right now is my calendar is packed, but it didn't have any travel built into it. So now I've got to go back and build the travel into it.
Gonna do the tour?
Yeah. CTP tours through a virtual environment was, you could stack up 4 or 5 of them in a day.
That was helpful.
Oh,
But it's not the same.
it's not
No,
the
it is
same.
not the same.
I love the CTP tours.
It's
That's one
not
of
the
my favorite parts
same.
of being
Well,
secretary.
it goes to the accessibility. I mean, I think that one of the strengths of MDOT is it is very accessible. If you're in the public, if you have an issue, I mean, you can go to your county tour if you're just a community activist. By the same token, people know where to go, and you have a direct line. It's the governor, it's you, it's the modes, but you, if they have an issue, they can come to MDOT and get it addressed. You're not pointing your finger over,
Right.
oh, don't talk to me, talk to
Right.
the guy behind the tree kind of thing. That's important.
It really is. And in many parts of our state, it's just important to show up.
That's right.
You know, take the drive down to Pax River, drive out to Garrett County, drive down to Somerset
Yeah, it's a
County.
rough, that tour's rough. I mean, I think every one of us will say, it tires you out, but
Yeah, but
it's
you
worth
gotta
it.
do it.
It's well worth it.
There's no
I-
substitute.
You
Very
gotta
good.
see
I
it.
enjoyed it.
You gotta see it.
You got to do it.
The last few were tough, but it was fun to live.
Yeah, I've been through some tough one. You know, I think that really, because I spent so many years as the planning director, I knew I had sat in the audience
You had
of
been
those
there.
tours, and I knew the issues inside and out before I kind of came in here. I can't imagine trying to do this job over the last year if you didn't have some history on things. But it's tough. But thank you all for spending some time with us
Great
today.
fun.
It was a lot of fun to get everybody
Yeah.
together.
Good to see everybody.
I think we're going to go outside and get a new time capsule going right now, aren't we, Aaron?
Yeah, we're gonna pull this table out. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull this table out. You guys are all gonna gather behind it. Talk low the time capsule. We're gonna Photoshop.
What's
And
it?
then Go for it.
I only use times for federal elected. I have.
Wherever you want me to go. I'll take that off your I'm glad to see all these able-bodied folks. That you climb the hills and everything.
Oh, okay. Everybody got a shovel? Guess I better walk around there. Solid gold shovel.
We could put one more in here. No, it looks like we've got everything.
Terry.
Who's missing?
Terry.
Time capsule.
Okay, hang on. Ready?
3, 2, 1. All right.
You guys finished filling the hole there.
Got it.
Good job.
Start with the Hey, Aaron. Trivia? Trivia? Who was your secretaries do the 25th and the 50th?
Let's see.
Not shuffling though.
Lighthizer was at both.
Well, but who is secretary?
Hey Greg, you missed the side. You missed the side.
At both? At the 25th?
I'll come out later and finish up.
No, he was at the reburial here.
Yeah.
Right. But I was thinking the 25th.
Oh, yeah, really 25th.
Because I actually was at the 25th. I just started in April and I was at the 25th then.
Oh, is that right?
When was that? 96. So, 96, it was, we did the Secretaries picnic in July and then the Muckety Mucks in August. I remember, but I was in MDOT, so. Yeah, I just remember it was hot and it was on the asphalt in August. So.
Another triumph of planning.
Exactly. Cool.
Something
So you want to come back in? Yeah. Absolutely.
it was basically the same year when DOT vaccinated.
Secretaries Flanagan, Mobley, and Secretary Smith. No, but for the other one. Hi. Sure, yep, I'd be happy to. Hi. Okay, is this everyone?
Secretaries Mobley, Secretaries Mobley, Flanagan, and Smith. Right here.
Oh, there he is.
That was a good event. How are you?
I was there. That's right.
Alright, we're gonna look right here.
I met on one side, it was like elementary school. It was on one side.
Great.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you.
It's a good event.
Can we get a copy of that picture?
Oh yeah, yeah, we can make it available.
That's what I just said. I didn't pull out my iPhone. I'm going to give my phone to somebody.
Yeah, yep, we'll make sure to we'll make a little, like, album of all the pictures from today. Or the front way.
Okay, we can meet with him tomorrow.
Can you send me?
Yeah.
I will.
Thank you.
All right.
Building looks good. Haven't seen it.
Yeah. And everything.
I'm sorry?
Did you see Dave?
Yes, we will need Dave. Dave, are you prepared for us to go down and do the interviews? Yeah. Okay. I've got Secretary Smith and Mobley. Okay. And so we're going to head down. All right. We'll be right there.